Hello everyone, Dark of All Trades here. Now today, I'm going to cut straight through the intro. Today I'm checking out a channel called Dan Mason. Dan wants to know something so much that he titled his video, "Why Can't Atheists Answer This Question?" Well, I am no stranger to answering questions, but I need to be clear that the only question atheists will ever answer the same, at least with the same meaning, is, do you believe some number of gods exist? And they will answer no in some form or fashion. But I don't know what question he's asking about, so let's see if this atheist can answer that question.
Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Dan Mason. My PhD is in Public Policy and Administration. In this video, I will review questions I received on YouTube. Because truth matters, I evaluate films about Christianity, politics, science, intelligent design, and abiogenesis. This is the beginning of Part 3. Questions to ask an atheist. Furthermore, what about principles and moral standards? How can such abstract and intangible traits emerge from the physical substance of the universe?
Well, it seems like he's asking, how can morality come from matter? It's a question that sounds deep until you realize it's based on a flawed assumption, that abstract concepts can't arise from physical systems. But that's just not how complexity works. Think about wetness. A single water molecule isn't wet itself, but arrange a bunch of them in just the right way, and suddenly we experience wetness, an emergent property. It's not something you add to the molecules, it's something that arises from their interaction. Consciousness is the same. A single neuron can't think, but your brain, with around 86 billion of them, gives rise to awareness, identity, and the ability to reflect. And that reflective capacity is what lets us consider morality, not as something floating in the ether, but as a label we apply to actions, values, and choices. Morality in a naturalistic framework is the product of thinking agents navigating harm, cooperation, fairness, and well-being. It is a human phenomenon, and that's a feature, not a bug. Morality isn't less meaningful because we define it, it's more meaningful because it's grounded in our lived experience. But let me take this further than anyone reasonably should and grant his conclusion. Even if a god existed, this wouldn't change. You still have a thinking agent deciding what's moral, meaning morality still depends on minds to define and recognize it. Divine command doesn't sidestep the problem, it just moves it. So if you're going to accept that morality depends on a mind, why not the collective minds of actual people here and now, things we know exist? So here's the big problem with his questioning. He's pointing to something we don't yet fully understand, the origins of morality or consciousness, and using that gap in his knowledge as implied evidence for his God. The logic goes something like this. Premise 1. Morality exists. Premise 2. Morality is abstract and doesn't have obvious material properties. Premise 3. We don't, in his view, have a satisfying natural explanation. Conclusion, therefore, God. This is classic God of the gaps. He's leveraging an area of complexity, moral intuitions and abstract reasoning, and using our current lack of a singular, universally agreed upon scientific explanation as if it were positive evidence for a deity. So what are the problems with this? Well, here are the major issues. First, it assumes that we don't currently have a naturalistic answer. The correct answer must be supernatural. Second, it ignores the progress made in fields like evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy of ethics that do offer plausible, testable accounts of how moral reasoning evolved and emerged. And third, it shifts the burden of proof from the theist to the skeptic, essentially saying, if you can't explain this completely, I win. But that isn't how we show anything exists or not. But let's see if he clarifies.
Even if it were possible, wouldn't morality still be considered arbitrary or relative?
You hear this kind of thing a lot, as if saying morality might be relative or arbitrary is some kind of mic drop. But let's take a closer look, because it's not nearly as damning as it sounds. Start with arbitrary. That word makes it sound like humans just invent morals on a whim, like pulling rules out of a hat. But moral systems, even secular ones, aren't built on randomness. If anyone knows one, let me know. Moral systems, for the most part, are based on reason, lived experience, and a shared desire to reduce harm, promote fairness, and help societies function. One would be hard-pressed to say that that is arbitrary. They're clearly deliberate. That's people thinking through the consequences of actions and adjusting over time. But relative, here's where people often get spooked. They assume it means anything goes. But moral relativism doesn't mean every view is equally valid. It means we recognize that morality depends on context. Is lying wrong? We could say usually, but if you're lying to protect someone from being hurt or killed, we make moral exceptions. That's context, not chaos. And here's the irony. Divine morality, the kind religious folks often claim is absolute, still ends up being interpreted by humans. And we don't all interpret it the same way. Christians disagree on issues like abortion, war, gender roles, and the death penalty, all while claiming to have the same holy book. So even if morality were handed down from on high, we still have to make sense of it, apply it, and decide when exceptions matter. That's functionally no different than secular morality. It just has a divine label slapped on it. And if you're saying that morality needs to come from God to avoid being arbitrary, well, that's Euthyphro's dilemma all over again. Is something good because God commands it, or does God command it because it's good? If it's the first, then morality is arbitrary. Just God's arbitrary. If it's the second, then morality exists independently of God, and we don't need God to explain it. Though now, the common response is appealing to God's nature. But with that, we still have the exact same problem. How do you know what God's nature is? Because again, different denominations in the same religion will disagree. They use the same subjective human interpretation to determine what they think God's nature is. So it seems that Christians are the actual moral relativists. The truth is, morality being relative doesn't make it meaningless. I say it makes it human. We're not perfect beings, and having constant evaluations of our system makes it flexible, adaptable, and open to improvement. That's how we got rid of slavery. That's how we changed our views on women's rights and racial equality. A moral system that can change in response to human understanding isn't weak, it's alive. And that's something any decent person should want.
How can significance emerge in a chaotic physical cosmos?
Okay, is this another question? I thought the video was about a single question. But I guess these are kinda sorta related if you squint really hard. Let's start by asking, what is significance, really? Strip away that lofty tone, and we're just talking about importance, something being worthy of attention. But to whom? Significance only exists if there's a mind to value something in the first place. It's a subjective experience, not a property like mass or charge. So the short answer is, it doesn't emerge in the universe like gravity or photosynthesis. It arises in minds like ours, that evolve to care, to notice, to assign value, and to find patterns. In a purely physical cosmos, significance isn't built in. We invent it, we project it, and that's a feature of conscious beings. Think about it. I might find profound significance in a poem, or a sunset, or my dog's butt wagging happiness. Someone else might see nothing special there, but that doesn't mean one of us is wrong. It means significance is personal. It's not woven into the fabric of space-time. It lives in how our brains interpret experience. And here's where the question backfires a bit. If the idea is that a chaotic physical cosmos can't produce significance, then I'd love to know how adding a god solves it. Unless you're just outsourcing your sense of importance to a divine authority, you're still relying on a conscious agent to assign value. You've just moved the subjectivity up a level, from human minds to a divine mind, but it's still a mind doing the work. And just like the last question, you have to ask how you know what this divine mind thinks, and if I remember right, no one knows the mind of God. Now here's a simple test that I like to call the government test. Imagine your government told you your purpose in life, told you who you have to marry, how many kids you're going to have, what job you must do, what things you're required to care about. If that sounds dystopian, that's because it is. Most people, including Christians, would rebel against that kind of control. So here's the question. Why would it suddenly become noble if a divine authority does the same thing? If someone hands you a list of what you're supposed to find significant, Would you call that purpose? I wouldn't, because that's control. That's programming. That's robbing you of your agency to decide what truly matters in your life. And let's be honest, even among believers, no one experiences significance exactly the same way. Christians disagree on what's meaningful, on justice and gender roles, family, and even worship. So that must mean that it isn't universal significance, but simply human interpretation. So, no, significance doesn't emerge out of atoms like steam from boiling water. It emerges from consciousness, which itself is an emergent property of complex physical processes. And thank atheismo for that. Because if significance were hardwired into the universe, unchangeable and absolute, we'd never be able to shift our values, or grow as a species, or reimagine what really matters. The beauty of a naturalistic cosmos is that it doesn't tell you what should matter. You get to decide, and that is freedom. That's what gives meaning its meaning. It's yours.
How can the concept of purpose arise in a cosmos that lacks inherent purpose?
Short answer, it doesn't. At least not inherent purpose. And that's okay. Longer answer, there's a big difference between purpose and inherent purpose. Purpose doesn't have to be built into the universe like a hidden instruction manual. It just needs a mind capable of assigning it. What's the purpose of a rock? Well, it depends on the situation. I can use it to hammer a nail or block a door, or I can stand on it to see farther. The rock didn't come with an objective. It just existed, and I gave it purpose based on my goals. Human lives work the same way. We create purpose based on values, relationships, ambitions. That should not be considered lesser, because that's powerful. That means our purpose can evolve, expand, and reflect our unique experiences. You don't need a cosmic job assignment stamped by a deity to live a meaningful life. Purpose isn't something we discover out there in the stars. It's something we create right here, in brains capable of asking the question in the first place.
All of these arguments are both intelligent and appealing. Despite the waning influence of religion in Western society over the past few centuries, which has intensified in recent decades and particularly in recent years, many individuals continue to hold beliefs in a higher power and a grand design. Various factors mainly influence these beliefs. An unprecedented change in our comprehension of the world. However, in the current century, there has been a significant change toward strong and unwavering disbelief in the existence of God among a substantial number of individuals who were formerly uncertain agnostics, or had faith believers, including numerous prominent public thinkers. The majority of scientists, particularly those at the highest level, are atheists. Undoubtedly, in contemporary times, science is essentially interchangeable with atheism. Why is this the case?
It's not even close. There are plenty of scientists who believe in a God, and there are plenty of atheists who reject certain parts of science, whether it's climate change, GMOs, or vaccines. Science and atheism are not interchangeable. They're not even in the same category. Atheism is one position on one question. Do you believe in a God? Science is a method, a tool for investigating the natural world. That's it. It's like saying cooking is interchangeable with vegetarianism because some vegetarians are great cooks. So why does this confusion happen? Well, it's true that many scientists, especially in certain fields like physics or biology, tend to be atheists. But that's not because science requires atheism. It's because when you spend your life asking questions, testing evidence, and building knowledge from what can be demonstrated, you are less likely to be satisfied with answers that hinge on faith or supernatural claims. Science doesn't test for the supernatural, not because it has an anti-God agenda, but because the supernatural, by definition, isn't testable. You can't run a double-blind trial on miracles or divine intervention. If a God interacts with the natural world in a measurable way, great, that becomes part of science. Until then, it stays outside its scope. Saying science is interchangeable with atheism is like saying astronomy is interchangeable with nihilism because it doesn't show signs of heaven in the stars. It's a category error, and frankly, a lazy one.
Although numerous persuasive arguments have supported the idea of a universe designed by supernatural forces, a robust scientific perspective has emerged recently, with several crucial components falling into place in the past decade or two. We currently possess compelling and perfectly feasible models that explain how our world, life, and awareness may have originated spontaneously and without guidance. These models encompass the entire process from the universe's inception to its current state of complexity. Utilizing these theories means there is no need for an external or initial cause, an intelligent designer, or a guiding force. Science may elucidate the natural origin of purpose, meaning, and morality in a universe that originated as uncomplicated, arbitrary, devoid of life, lacking purpose, and indifferent.
Hang on a minute. So let me get this straight. First, you claim that atheists can't answer the question of where morality, meaning, or purpose come from. Then you say that atheism and science are essentially interchangeable. And now you say that science may be able to explain the natural origin of purpose, meaning, and morality? Let's line that up logically for a second. Atheists can't answer the question. Atheism and science are basically the same thing. Science may have the answer. So by your own logic, atheists can answer the question, or at the very least, they're working from the method that you just admitted might actually have an answer. That's not just a contradiction, that's a full-on logical faceplant. I can disprove his video using his own video. He's his own Trojan source. You can't paint atheism as bankrupt on this question and then turn around and concede that the toolset you associated with atheism, science, may in fact solve it. That's like saying painters don't understand Keller theory and then admitting they use a Keller wheel that might be right. And it's even more of a problem when you try to frame the supernatural as the only explanation left standing. Because science, the thing you just equated to atheism, is actively developing natural explanations for morality, meaning, and purpose. Then there's less and less of a need for a supernatural explanation at all. Your God of the Gaps just got pushed back another mile, or 1.609 kilometers for all my metric users. You don't get to float between science can't help you and, well, science might help you, depending on which direction the rhetorical wind is blowing. If you want to make a faith-based argument, go ahead and own it. But don't borrow the authority of science to look credible while also pretending it's fundamentally incompatible with your worldview. Either you're making a faith-based claim or you're following the evidence, which increasingly points towards natural emergence. You can't have it both ways.
Science has been making remarkable progress in addressing the fundamental questions. The acquisition of scientific discoveries has accelerated, surpassing most individuals' comprehension and grasp, preventing them from fully understanding and comprehending the consequences of these insights. Several renowned science authors, including myself—
Hold up. Science authors, including yourself? Alright, I've got a few questions here. First off, which scientists? Can you name even one of the renowned science authors you're referring to? Because tossing out a vague appeal to unnamed authority doesn't exactly inspire confidence. If I said, a bunch of historians agree with me, but I couldn't tell you who, you'd, rightfully, raise an eyebrow. Second, you refer to yourself as one of those science authors. But unless I missed a major publication in Nature or the Journal of Cosmology and Astroparticle Physics, your degree is in public policy and administration, right? Now I want to be fair here. A degree in public policy and administration might give insight on how moral frameworks influence governance, or how ethical norms shape social laws. That's important. But that's not the same as explaining the origins of morality from a neurobiological or evolutionary perspective, or speaking authoritatively on cosmos, abiogenesis, or particle physics. Being able to describe how society uses morality isn't the same as explaining where morality comes from at the cognitive or biological level. That's a whole different discipline. It's like having a law degree and acting like that makes you a biochemist. You're not an idiot, but you're outside of your field. So unless you cross-train in molecular biology, theoretical physics, or evolutionary psychology, maybe don't include yourself in a list of renowned science authors without backing that up. And if you're going to talk about science, at least own the limits of your background. Or, here's a thought, actually quote real scientists who specialize in the fields you're referencing. Otherwise, This just starts to sound like a preacher quoting from Popular Science magazine and calling it a peer-reviewed source.
Have endeavored to consolidate and elucidate these discoveries using clear and comprehensible language, making them accessible to the ordinary educated reader. This vlog series and additional information aims to keep the public current. As a scholar, I am particularly interested in sharing insights that bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and the human experience. I aim to address the aspects of life that hold significance for individuals as they navigate the challenges of uncertainty, anxiety, and adversity in their search for purpose and meaning.
Now, this is admirable on the surface, but let's not pretend that significance and purpose are things you find out there in the universe like a rock on the ground. They don't exist independently. They're things our mind assigns. That's called subjective significance. What matters to you is what you decide matters. And sure, people sometimes project purpose onto others. But just because you think someone's purpose is X doesn't mean they're obligated to care. That applies to people, institutions, and yes, even gods. Now let me be more generous again than anyone should be. Let's say I grant that a god does exist. Now what? You'd still have to show that this god even has a purpose for you. Then you'd have to prove what that purpose actually is. Then you'd have to demonstrate how you know it's correct. Finally, and most importantly, you would need to explain why you, I, or anyone should care. Why should anyone submit to a divine plan that they didn't ask for and didn't agree to? If your answer to that is just because authority, congratulations, that's the moral framework of a dictator. And that's it for his video. So what is he saying here? What is the question that atheists like me can't answer? How can principles and moral standards emerge from physical matter, i.e., how can morality arise in a naturalistic universe? Wouldn't morality still be arbitrary or relative, i.e., without God, isn't morality meaningless? How can significance emerge in a chaotic physical cosmos, i.e., how can life have any meaning if the universe is indifferent? How can the concept of purpose arise in a cosmos that lacks inherent purpose, i.e., if the universe wasn't designed, how can anyone have a real purpose? If we distill the rhetorical fog, his implied challenge seems to be, how can morality, meaning, and purpose exist in a purely natural, godless universe? That's it. That's the unanswerable question. But instead of clearly framing it, he smears it across multiple sentences using emotionally charged phrasing like chaotic cosmos and devoid of purpose to lead the audience toward the God of the Gaps answer without saying it outright. But what do you think? Do you think Danny Mason presented an airtight question no atheist can answer? Or do you think that countless people have given suitable answers, and even if they haven't, he is presenting the God of the Gaps argument? Let me know in the comments below. Overall, I give Mr. Mason here an 8 facepalming Mr. Jesuses out of 10. At best, he acknowledges that science has compelling models for the emergence of life and consciousness, and concedes that science and atheism are strongly linked, especially among scientists. However, he titles his video as if atheists are dodging a question, but never actually poses a distinct one. He treats morality, purpose, and meaning as if they must be supernatural, begging the question. He implicitly claims that atheists can't deal with these ideas, when in fact extensive work exists in fields like evolutionary ethics, moral philosophy, cognitive science, and secular humanism. For example, wouldn't morality still be arbitrary or relative? Ignores well-established secular moral theories like consequentialism or virtue ethics. It suggests that these are unacceptable by default without considering their actual content. He claims PhD in public policy, but speaks on topics like abiogenesis, cosmology, moral philosophy, and theology, well outside his stated field. He presents himself as a scholar of science communication, but offers no citations, no academic sourcing, and leans heavily on vague philosophical appeals. He uses academic language, abiogenesis, scientific discoveries, etc., to lend authority to vague or unsupported assertions. For example, compelling and perfectly feasible models that explain how our world, life, and awareness may have originated, then fails to mention even a hint of one. That's it for this one. So now, what do you think? Do you think I answered his question? Or do you think he used some mysterious Masonic secret handshake to baffle and befuddle me into missing it? Let me know in the comments below. I know his title was, Why Can't Atheists Answer This Question? So technically the answer is, we can. But you know I can't just say that. Now, if you appreciated this fully formed response, show that by hitting that like button. Though you can find fantastic formulaic films fervently foisted onto your following YouTubes by hitting that subscribe button. Though speaking of fervent in spirit, I need to give the most ardent thanks to my patrons, especially Calaminous Anima and Sora, who are the significance that my channel sees in the YouTube's world. If you'd like to join the not-so-secret club, you can join them for as low as a single dollar a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. My last few videos have been getting more and more views, and I have to say it's all thanks to every single one of you. This channel is more than just me and my braining. It's all of you that watch, like, comment, and especially share the video or give the super thanks or join the Patreon that really keep me doing the work that goes into the hopefully seen as thoughtful presentation. Thank you all for keeping me going. And as a short bonus, I want to say that I went through a few of his videos. It seems like this channel is a treasure trove of content, but so few views on most of his videos. So here's a short video he released about 3 months after the one I dove into today. It's titled, Understanding Atheism, What It Truly Means.
Definition of atheism. Atheism is typically defined as the lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. This definition is broad and encompasses various forms of skepticism towards theistic claims. However, atheism itself does not provide a positive belief system or explanatory framework for phenomena beyond the rejection of deities.
Okay, now I'm just confused. In this one, he actually defines atheism correctly, a lack of belief in gods. Not a belief system, not a worldview. But in the video I just did a full response to, he acts like atheism is a moral philosophy, a purpose-destroying ideology, and even an existential virus infecting society. So which is it? Do you know what atheism is or not? Because you don't get to say atheism has no explanatory framework in one video, and then act like it's responsible for science, morality, and Western decline in another. That's not just inconsistent, that's dishonest. So either he forgot what he said, or he's hoping his audience forgot. I haven't, and I'm not going to let him slide on that. And that isn't limited to just this one. It seems like in a few of them, he generally understands what atheism is. I even commented on one showing appreciation for a theist not making atheism something it isn't, which is why I was a bit surprised by today's video. Thanks for sticking around with me for this short bonus. I appreciate every single one of you, and I think that when theists get things right, we should give them credit. Hopefully that will encourage them to not misrepresent atheists. So your homework for today is, if you see a theist doing something right when it comes to atheists, genuinely point it out and give them credit. With luck, we can help get more and more theists to recognize atheists for not the monolith straw man that apologists like to make. So keep being the thoughtful atheists you are. And as always, keep learning.